Today's hearing centers on explosive allegations about training practices inside federal immigration enforcement. A U.S. senator questions whether an internal memo authorized tactics that may conflict with long-standing constitutional protections, particularly the Fourth Amendment's guardrails around searches and arrests. At stake is more than a single document. It's the credibility of agency leadership, the role of whistleblowers, and how oversight functions when accusations of misconduct surface. As you listen, consider not just what is being alleged, but what evidence is presented to support or dispute those claims.
Probably not going to have any more colleagues from either side, but I have some more questions, so I'm going to go into them, not at huge length, but you've been very, very helpful and cooperative, and I want to thank you in advance. You know, the truth is that as we speak, literally, as you are here, the Trump administration is arming a paramilitary force, a new class of recruits, sending them out on the streets to repeat this kind of violence and brutality. It isn't an isolated or aberrant instance. It's the result of intentional institutional decisions, and we've documented here through the memo that Acting Director Lyons prepared and then concealed. It was used to instruct trainers like Mr. Schwank, beginning when he started in May, or rather in September. The memo dates from May. And it was used for hundreds of agents who now are on the streets and in our neighborhoods. These agents now have less training than most of the police officers in our police departments throughout Connecticut and throughout the country. They have less training than the state police of Connecticut and other state police forces throughout the country. And maybe even more shockingly, they have training to break the law, which would never be tolerated in our communities. Police chiefs who wrote this kind of memo would be fired. They would be discharged, and they would never find another job in policing. Advising and training members of their police force to break down doors, barge into people's homes, arrest or detain them without a warrant, a systematic, purposeful policy to break the law, would result in firing that police chief. And yet what we have is brutal and violent tactics being used by ICE and CBP tactics with the approval, in fact, encouragement of the very head of ICE, who said to me that this memo was distributed through an email throughout the department. Mr. Schwank, to your knowledge, was this memo ever distributed?
Thank you, Senator. To my knowledge, this memo was never distributed to staff in general. In fact, when I came to the Academy in September, I had never seen it despite being a counsel for the agency. I never saw it again after it was shown to me that first time and maybe one other time when it was shown to me. Other than someone physically handing me the document, I never saw it again. And right before I left, I checked the repository where the agency keeps a copy of every official memo and policy guidance that is in effect, and there is no copy of it there. And Senator, I will point out to you, if we look at this document, if we look at it, every memo issued by ICE has a control number. It has something on it that indicates that it is an official policy document and where it falls in the agency's archives. And that's not on this document anywhere.
At this stage, the focus shifts from accusation to documentation. The witness is disputing whether the memo in question carried the formal markers of official agency policy. such as control numbers, archival records, and distribution labels. In federal agencies, those procedural details matter. They determine whether guidance is binding policy or informal instruction. There's also a legal dimension worth clarifying. The Fourth Amendment protects persons, not just citizens, from unreasonable searches and seizures. If cadets were trained to enter homes without judicial warrants, that would raise serious constitutional concerns. But those claims ultimately hinge on documentation and interpretation. So here's the key question. Is this evidence of a rogue internal directive, a breakdown in bureaucratic process, or a deeper policy disagreement within the agency? And how should oversight bodies verify competing testimony under oath?
Also, anytime we issue a memo, there is something in the document to control its release, something that says law enforcement only or for official use only, classified, secret, something. And there's nothing on this memo that says that. Nowhere on this memo is there anything that would let you know that this is an official policy of the agency. And to my knowledge, it's never been disseminated as one. It's been handed out piecemeal to people to use when the agency thinks they need to.
Which directly undercuts the veracity of Acting Director Lyons' testimony under oath before a congressional committee. I want to go into some of the details here because I think they are so revealing, Mr. Schwank. You started your job at ICE in September of last year. This memo dates from May. How did you first see this memo?
Thank you, Senator. So I've been with ICE for about 4.5 years, but I was an instructor at Glencoe from September. The memo was shown to me by my supervisor at Glencoe. It was given to me in person with instructions that I could read it, but not take any notes on it, that I could read it in their presence, and that was it, and that I was going to teach from it, but I couldn't keep a copy of it to reference, and I couldn't document that I taught it to anyone, just that I could read it.
You were to train on it, but your supervisor didn't want you to have a copy of it for fear that it might be revealed. And in fact, it was revealed only when whistleblowers came to me, brave and strong as they were, came to me, put their professional careers and personal lives on the line, and said they would reveal it. When you were told to train it on it, I believe that there was some conversation about instructing agents who were your students to follow this memo's policies, not the other written guidance that they might be provided. Is that correct?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, that is correct. So what the cadets were told to do was that they had the authority to make an arrest under this memo in someone's home, that they should knock on the door, and if the person did not open, as Miss Gibson Brown's family did, that they could use force to enter that home, reasonable force to execute the I-205 administrative removal order. That's what we were teaching cadets at the academy. That's what we were told to teach them. And I will tell you, when I taught my classes, I would tell the cadets that this policy existed, and I would tell them that they needed to check with their local office before they did anything, because there was no legal basis for this. But I did tell them this was the agency policy.
Were you apprehensive that a failure to follow this illegal policy might result in demotion or discharge?
Yes, Senator, I was. In fact, it was made very clear to me when it was shown to me that if I did not follow it, I would probably lose my job. Two other attorneys for the agency had just been removed from teaching positions at the academy. One forcibly resigned. And the way it was shown to me or told to me was that it was because they disagreed with management over this policy.
So this illegal policy was not just a suggestion, it was an order, and people were disciplined as a result of failing to implement this illegal policy. Is that correct?
That is my understanding, Senator. As I said, it's my understanding that an attorney before me, in fact, the reason I was at Glencoe is because I was the alternate for the person who was forcibly resigned over their refusal to teach the memo.
And just so everyone understands, this memorandum was written by the acting director of this agency, ICE, with instructions about breaking a long-standing practice and policy of ICE itself, a well-established policy and practice of police forces going back hundreds of years, a practice and policy that embodies the core Fourth Amendment values and provisions that no person, not just citizen, can have his home violated without a court saying that there's probable cause to do so. You taught ICE agents, candidates for graduation that then went on to Minneapolis. They went all around the country. We've talked about DHS contention that the standards are the same, which is belied by the documents as well as your testimony. The numbers of courses have been drastically cut. The hours have been reduced. The physical or practical exams have been truncated. DHS may contend, well, we give tests to these cadets before they graduate. But my understanding is that many of the tests are paper tests, multiple choice exams, rather than the practical tests on use of force and pistols and other kinds of skills that are really necessary to fairly and effectively enforce the law. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator, that's correct. So what the Academy does is we have two types of tests. We have multiple choice exams and we have practical exams. With the multiple choice tests, the cadets went from having to do them in a closed book format where they had to depend on what they had learned and memorized to doing them open book and open note, where essentially the only thing we're really testing them on is their ability to search a document to find the answers. But more important than that, we took away the practical testing. Under the old rules, we took everything they learned in the Academy, all that they learned, and we made them apply it. We put them through a range of scenarios where we could test, do they understand when they can enter a home or not? Do they understand when they can make an arrest or not? And if they showed that they did not know that, we could fail them and send them back and make them try again and demonstrate their knowledge. And if they failed twice, out of the Academy. And maybe 6 months later, 90 days later, they could come back after they demonstrated to their home office that they were ready. But today, no matter how badly a cadet does at those practical exams, no matter how many mistakes they make, no matter how egregiously they violate the law during a practical, we graduate them.
I think people should understand, and Representative Garcia alluded to this fact, that a poorly trained officer of the law carrying a firearm or other instruments of force actually makes our neighborhoods and communities less safe. If there were ever a demonstration of it, it has happened in Minneapolis, in California, in Chicago. We've had graphic, dramatic evidence of it at that very panel table. Individuals who've been shot, almost killed. Relatives of Renee Good, who was killed. Others who were treated with brutality that is unspeakable, dragged out of cars, denied medical treatment. An untrained or poorly taught agent of the government makes our nation less safe. I'm going to ask you, have you seen cadets graduate despite using disproportionate force in practical exercises? And can you provide an example?
Yes, Senator, I have. I have seen multiple examples of that in the training program. I have seen examples of cadets who have drawn their firearms on each other, by accident. I have seen cadets, and this is in the last day or two of training, so this is at the end of the program. I have seen cadets make arrests of individuals that had committed no crime and for which there was no cause to make the arrest, despite the cadet allegedly having been taught the law related to the crimes involved. I have seen officers apply excessive force in these training scenarios where they have made arrest attempts that involved drawing their firearm, using pepper spray, various events that they were not authorized to do and which were not justified by the circumstances, in which no objectively reasonable police officer would have done what they did. And they still graduated. I have seen cadets, and this was a moment that stuck out to me at the academy. I saw a cadet in a scenario where we had bystanders who were allegedly filming or recording what was happening, pull out pepper spray and pepper spray a bystander. And when we asked the cadet afterwards why they did it, their answer was, it's because I've seen what we're doing in Minneapolis. It doesn't matter what we teach them about the law if what they watch on television and on Reddit and on the internet tells them that they can get away with things. The academy can teach them till they're blue in the face. But if they see that in practice the real rules are different than what we're teaching them, they follow the rules that they see.
Thank you. I'm going to yield to Representative Tlaib, who I understand has a few more questions. I may have just a couple afterward.
This hearing underscores several intersecting issues: training standards, internal accountability, constitutional safeguards, and the power of whistleblower disclosures. The testimony alleges reduced practical testing, pressure to follow disputed guidance, and a culture shaped as much by public perception as by written policy. At the same time, these are claims made under oath that would require further investigation, documentation, and response from agency leadership to fully evaluate. Oversight hearings are designed to surface exactly these tensions between enforcement efficiency and civil liberties, between agency authority and constitutional limits. What's your interpretation of this testimony? Does it point to systemic reform needs or unresolved internal conflict amplified by politics? Share your perspective below, and if you appreciate thoughtful, balanced breakdowns of complex political hearings, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth analysis.